Okay, well, if you work for one of the automotive manufacturers or are a supplier to an automotive manufacturer, one of the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3s, whatever, then you are already familiar with ISO TS 16949, which is the industry-specific standard based on ISO 9001. Both of these standards have recently received significant updates, ISO 9001-2008 being replaced by ISO 9001-2015, and ISO TS evolving into IATF 16949. This is significant. For IATF 16949, that biggest change has been that it has been decoupled from ISO 9001 in both title and structure. The International Automotive Task Force, or the IATF, not the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, now controls the 16949 standard, the IATF 16949, and is responsible for future updates to its specifications and audit requirements. Thus, although IATF 16949 requires compliance to ISO 9001-2015,
that's key, that's a key point.
It exists as a completely separate document subject to its own review and update process. Very interesting. Now, here to tell us a little bit more about why this came about, as well as some key dates to keep in mind for the 16949 transition, is Ismael Belmarez, Accreditation Manager for DNV GL Business Assurance, North America. Hello, Ismael.
Hello, Derek. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you? I think everybody calls you Ish. Is that right?
Yes, I go by Ish.
Okay, Ish. Good. All right. So tell us what was the reason? Why was ISO TS 16949 decoupled from ISO 9001 to become the IATF 16949?
Well, there were several reasons, but one of the main reasons was the flexibility that it allows by being an independent standard. Right now, the way it was, they had to follow the ISO protocols anytime they wanted to make changes and things like that. So this allows them more flexibility to react to market changes. Also, if things came along and they had to revise a standard, they had to go through those ISO protocols, and they're pretty strict. So now it's basically in the hands of the OEMs and IATF itself, and they're able now, as you mentioned, and good that you mentioned, one of the big things is that it's still totally dependent on ISO 9000. It fully complies to it, and actually the IATF, if you actually look at the standard itself, no longer includes the ISO 9000 text. However, in the verbiage, it says you shall comply with all the requirements of ISO 9000. So for a company getting certified, they need to have both the ISO 9000 standard and the IATF 16949.
And Ismael, when they say comply with the ISO 9001 standard, they specify that it has to be the latest version of the standard, or do they care?
It's the latest version.
Okay.
So when you go to IATF or you upgrade from TS 6949 to IATF 6949, they expect you to be compliant at that same time to ISO 9000 2015 version.
Got it.
So Ish, give us a little high-level perspective here. What's the major differences, departures, if you will, of IATF 16949 versus the old ISO TS 16949?
Well, the main difference you're going to see is, of course, the high-level structure. It's going to follow the same formatting as ISO 9001, or the main changes from the 2008 to the 2015. On top of that, of course, the IATF or the automotive requirements, specific requirements, were also updated, and you can see some of the recent things that have occurred in the automotive industry, like product traceability, with all the recalls that have occurred, have been beefed up, so to speak. So there's some additional requirements in the traceability part. You also see a lot of safety related issues, or functional safety is also now incorporated into the standard. Another part is integrated software. As technology has evolved, a lot of the products themselves now have, or a lot of the components in a car have integrated software. So there is some controls that have been incorporated into the standard for that integrated software, and also the updates. How are they going to occur if they need to occur? So that's also in there. And then there's also a little bit of clarification on the management and development requirements of subcontractors. In the past, it just said you shall comply with it. You shall use the TS requirements as a basis for developing of subcontractors. But it also said that at least they shall comply to ISO 9000. Now it requires more of the automotive requirements, or the TS or the IATF requirements.
And Ish, I mean, one of the big changes for ISO 9001 2015 was that they took away any language that prescribed how you documented anything. I mean, basically, it's up to the user to define how they want to document or show auditors what they're doing to meet any of the requirements of the standard, which was kind of a big deal. How does that work with 16949? Is it still kind of whatever you want to show us, or is it a little bit more prescriptive?
IATF, or the predecessor, the TS, was very prescriptive to begin with. That has not really been taken away. So where you do have some flexibility with ISO 9000, IATF is still very prescriptive, is on what tools shall be used, what documentation is required, or you have to show that whatever system you have is equivalent to those requirements. So IATF, like a lot of scheme-specific requirements, are still very prescriptive.
And what are some of the key dates that people need to be aware of in this transition from ISO TS 16949 to IATF 16949?
Okay, there are two key dates. Basically, there's October 1, 2017, so later on this year. Any audit after that date must be to the new IATF standard. There's no wiggle room there, basically. So any audit after October 1 will be to the new standard. The audit time also increases because any transition audit has to be recertification time allocated to it to make the conversion. Clients will receive a brand new certificate at that point, a new 3-year certificate. The other date to keep in mind is September 14, 2018. All transitions must have occurred by that date. If not, because of all the old ISO TS 6949 certificates will expire on that date.
And Ish, before we get to the end of this segment, we want to ask you, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the IATF database of registered companies. This is an important point. Is everyone going to have access to that? I mean, purchasing people, for instance, who need to verify that a company is registered to the standard?
Okay, the IATF database has been there for a little while. It's all the CBs are required. All the certification bodies have to input our information into that. So it has client names, the date of the audit, who the auditors were, the nonconformances, whether they were major or minor. Also, in addition to that, also what's referred to as the supplier code. So if you're supplying to Ford, Chrysler, GM, Peugeot, Renault, they all have a supplier code associated with them. Those supplier codes are put into the database as well. The people that have, the only organizations that have access to it at this point in time are the OEMs. So Ford, Chrysler, the OEMs, etc., have access to that database. So they're able to see. They have talked, and maybe in the future that they'll be, go down or allow the tier 1s and tier 2s to have access to it. But at this point in time, it's only the OEM. So if you supply directly to Ford, Chrysler, Peugeot, Renault, then they have direct access. The supplier codes also make a difference in that the system itself allows for automatic notifications if the client is suspended or their certificate has expired. Say you're a supplier to Ford, if your certificate expires or you're suspended, Ford automatically gets notification based on that supplier code. But right now, if you're asking about who has access to that, it is the OEMs.
All right, Ish. Well, thanks for being with us here with us. There is a webinar coming up on this topic that Ish will be the subject matter expert on. I'll be hosting, and that webinar is the IATF 16949 2016 Transition Experiences. That's next Tuesday, at March 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Note that time. This is earlier than we typically do our webinars, so it's 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Ish will be joined by Wendy Parr, owner of Parr Consulting. So be sure to sign up for the webinar. The link is below the player page. Ish, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. So
We'll see you on Tuesday.
See you on Tuesday.
Thanks, Ish.
Yep.